An hour and a half until President Biden's first State of the Union address. He's still at the White House. We understand he will say Putin was wrong. We were ready. Reuters flashed just a couple of minutes ago. Don't know whether it will be announced at the State of the Union, but the United States to ban all Russian flights from U.S. airspace. And we are here with Mike Allen, Washington's most connected reporter, founder of Politico Playbook, then founder of Axios and writer of Axios AM. How cognizant is the White House of the need to strike a more somber tone because of Kyiv?
Yeah, Leland, this speech has gotten a complete rewrite. So State of the Union is always going to go through tons of drafts. I'm told this was taken from the top because, like, you know, the intel, they thought that Kyiv was going to fall fast, and it hasn't, and that's changed the tone of this. So as an experienced anchor, you know those awkward transitions, and I've heard you say on the air, we're going to take a turn here, and that's what the president's going to do, right? He's going to start with the United States on the world stage, talking very tough on Putin. I'm told you had a little preview there. I'm told more tough language on Putin. He's going to talk a lot about America's role in the world, America's role in protecting democracy, and then the turn. He's going to talk about the economy. He's going to talk about COVID. He's going to say that we've taken a turn there, that the United States is a turning point.
And now we don't have masks?
That's right. Back to normal is a big part of his message. He's going to suggest, we don't know if it's in this speech, there's going to be a COVID speech later in March where he's going to talk more about kids in schools, being in their schools, and federal workers being back to work. But then the fourth, after he does the world, the economy, COVID, he wants to end on an optimistic note. He's going to talk about the future. There, he's going to point to his Supreme Court pick.
Interesting. Okay, so his two wins, if you will, are COVID and his Supreme Court pick. He can point to that. He says he's going to do something about inflation. I'm wondering about the Republican side of this, because we all expect right afterwards, and even before it, you'll have Republicans who naturally will just come out and eviscerate whatever the president says, no matter what. Are they having to hold back their fire because of Ukraine?
So there is a bit of a statesman-like, patriotic moment. I think some things are being held back on both sides, but it's not going to last long. So Leland, Axios is up tonight with new reporting from our Andrew Solander about House Republicans talking about what they're going to do when, they would say when, they get the majority back after the midterm. So like both parties is unusual. The two parties kind of agree. Democrats more likely than not to lose, more likely than not to have a speaker, Kevin McCarthy of California. And what are they going to do? We're told that the oversight committees, the investigations that they're going to do, the big three that they're talking about are one, Hunter Biden, can't make it up, going right after his foreign business dealings. Second, the D.C. mayor, right where we are, Muriel Bowser, Mayor Bowser looking at crime and COVID policies. And third, COVID, looking at the origins of it. And if you want to add a fourth, the Justice Department and how they've handled school boards. So those are all culture war issues, aggressive.
To come out on.
Yeah, very little of this statesmanship. There's people in the party who argue. People are tired of the partisan fights. People are going to want something to be accomplished. That doesn't seem to be in the blueprint right now.
We had up earlier President Biden's problems, inflation, the border, crime. You go through that list. You remember 2010 probably better than I do. It was the last time Republicans led in what's called the generic ballot. If the election were held today, President Trump would win over President Biden. Moderate House Democrats who are in the districts where it would swing back to President Trump, what are they saying they need to hear? And more importantly, what do they not want the president to say?
Yeah, great point. And a term that they use here on the Hill for those swing Democrats, they call them frontline. So a military analogy there. And what they're hoping tonight, like they need to see some change in the president's polls. Like their fate to some degree is tied to his. So that's this abrupt turn that in addition to talking a lot about democracy and America's role in the world, he needs to remind people what he's done and give them hope about what's coming. So we're told the president is going to talk a lot tonight about how the economy has grown and could grow. The phrase that you'll hear is the economy growing from the bottom up, middle out, rather than top down. That's a favorite phrase of this White House.
What have they maybe taken out in deference to those frontline Democrats?
Yeah, so the more progressive policies, some of the policies of the left that the Virginia governor now used to great advantage in his campaign. So like you and I were talking today about like how do you divide up the percentages of who's out there? Like there's about 10% in the middle. Those are very important to those Democrats in either hostile or swing districts, and they need a president. This is part of why you're hearing so much about the back to normal agenda. The blue states also going back to normal. The president going to be talking about what he's going to do for Americans, how to make things easier for working Americans. Because like one of the challenges here is acknowledge how people are feeling. Don't make excuses. Don't be defensive, and yet show that you have a plan. And you've been in the job for a year. Like you have to tell people what you have to show for it.
All right, yeah, Nancy Pelosi saying very much you wanted to have people show for it. It's interesting what you said about acknowledging that people want to get back to normal. The permanent pandemic is no longer a winning strategy. How cognizant is the White House? And I'm fascinated by this, and I don't know why, but maybe it's just because I covered the war in 2014 and saw some of Vladimir Putin's tactics. There is the ability for Vladimir Putin to watch, and we know he can, on whatever cable network he chooses, we hope it's NewsNation, to watch President Biden on one side of the screen, and you'll have a split screen of Kyiv, a live shot of Kyiv. He has the ability, quite literally, to press a button and have missiles start raining down so that live shot sees it. How cognizant is the White House of that? What's their contingency plan?
Yeah, it's chilling. There's no contingency plan for that. And that's why you're going to see the president at the top coming out tough and used his words, saying that the nation was ready. But there's a lot more to come, right? Like there's a lot of concern about could there be some sort of a cyber attack? Like it's still possible for this to hit home in ways that go beyond gas prices.
Yeah, and he probably also certainly gets a lot more leeway from Democrats, from Republicans, from the American people. If the commander-in-chief is seen as dealing with a crisis overseas, that goes a long way. We've seen that in the past. I know you covered it with George W. Bush when you used to travel with him. Mike Allen, Axios AM, will have the note tomorrow morning with the most important tidbits and new reporting from the White House. Mike, thank you very much.
Leland, thank you for the coverage.
Come back. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.